charity event had been billed as an evening of fun, a glitzy fundraiser for the city's youth boxing program. Under the glow of overhead lights, the ring sat in the center of the ballroom, its ropes gleaming red against the polished floor. The guests, bankers, socialites, and athletes mingled around tables draped in white, sipping champagne and trading laughs. It was all light-hearted until the reigning champion, Dante the King Carver, decided to make the evening about himself. "Anyone here brave enough to take a swing at me?" Dante called out from the ring, his voice booming through the microphone. The crowd erupted in cheers. He was a towering figure in his tailored black and gold robe, every muscle sculpted, every smile dripping with arrogance. It was meant as a playful dare, but his eyes scanned the audience for prey. That's when they landed on her. She was standing near the back, holding a paper cup of soda, her hair tied in a neat bun. Her name was Aaliyah Brooks, 19, lean, dressed in jeans and a hoodie. She hadn't planned on stepping into a ring that night. She had come because the youth center she volunteered at had received an invitation. But now, under Dante's mocking gaze, she felt the crowd's attention shift toward her like a wave. "You there?" Dante said, pointing. "How about you? Let's give the audience a good laugh." The laughter rippled instantly. Some guests shook their heads in amusement. Others smirked, as if they already knew how this story would end. Aaliyah froze for a moment, her eyes locked on the boxer's smug expression. She could have declined, stayed in the safe shadow of the crowd, but something in her chest, part pride, part defiance, pushed her forward. As she climbed into the ring, whispers broke out. Is she serious? She's going to get hurt? This'll be over in seconds. The referee, brought in for the exhibition bouts, looked at her with mild concern. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked quietly. She nodded without hesitation. Dante leaned toward her and whispered just loud enough for the first row to hear, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll go easy on you." His grin was a blade disguised as a smile. The bell rang. Dante circled slowly, tapping his gloves together as if warming up. Aaliyah stood still, watching him, not his gloves, not his shoulders, but the rhythm of his feet. He threw a lazy jab that brushed her cheek. The crowd laughed. Another jab, this time catching her lightly on the forehead. "Keep your guard up," he taunted. Every word, every laugh from the audience burned into her. She remembered the sound of her father's voice in the garage all those years ago. "Don't show them your full hand until you know they've played theirs." Her father, Marcus Brooks, had been a local legend, a boxer whose career had been cut short by an injury that never healed right. While the world forgot him, he never forgot the craft, and he passed it on to her in the most unassuming setting. A small, heavy bag in a dusty corner of their home, footwork drills in the driveway, shadow boxing in the kitchen when dinner was on the stove. He told her that a fight wasn't about strength, it was about seeing what the other person didn't realize they were showing. The third jab came, and this time she moved her head just enough for the punch to sail past her ear. It wasn't dramatic, but it was enough for Dante's grin to falter for a heartbeat. The laughter from the crowd dimmed just slightly. If you're enjoying this story of justice and hidden strength, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple act of prejudice turned into the most valuable lesson of Dante Carver's life. The bell rang again to end the round, but the look on Dante's face had shifted, still confident, but with a flicker of something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or the first shadow of doubt. And in Aaliyah's eyes, something had woken up. The second round began with a sharper clang of the bell, as if the sound itself knew the tone had shifted. Dante rolled his shoulders, flashing that easy, cocky smile again, but there was a stiffness in the way he moved now. He no longer sauntered, he prowled. Aaliyah kept her gloves up, her eyes focused on his chest rather than his face. Her father had always told her, the chest tells the truth, the eyes will lie. She could see his breathing, the way it expanded just before a punch. The first blow came fast, a snapping jab meant to sting rather than hurt. She stepped back, letting it fall short. The crowd chuckled again, though it was less certain this time. Dante followed with a quick 1-2, the first glancing off her forearm, the second brushing her cheek. It was light, almost playful. But the playfulness wasn't for her benefit. It was for the crowd's. He was putting on a show, the undefeated king toying with a mouse. Aaliyah's jaw tightened. She'd felt this before, in a different kind of ring. The schoolyard. The years of being underestimated for her size, her quiet nature, her skin. Every taunt had built a quiet furnace inside her. She didn't lash out then, and she wouldn't lash out now, not until the moment mattered. Dante raised his gloves high and threw a looping hook toward her temple. She ducked under it smoothly, feeling the wind of it graze her hair. She heard her father's voice in her mind. "Don't just dodge! Learn something every time you move." She noticed it immediately, the slight hitch in his footwork when he threw that hook. A fraction of a second when his balance shifted too far forward. But Dante didn't notice her noticing. He kept up the performance, tapping her shoulder with a glove, grinning as if to say, "See, you can't touch me." The crowd laughed again, but it was thinner now, more of a habit than true amusement. Then came the moment that made her fingers itch with readiness. Dante stepped in, feinting a jab, and overextended just enough for her to see that same hitch in his balance. She didn't take the shot, not yet. Timing wasn't just about openings, it was about breaking someone's rhythm so badly they couldn't get it back. Her thoughts flickered to the night her father told her why he stopped boxing. A torn tendon, yes, but also a betrayal. A friend he trusted had bet against him, knowing the injury would force him to quit mid-match. That night, Marcus had taught her the most important lesson of all. Your greatest weapon isn't your punch, it's making them realize they're not in control. The bell rang again, ending the round. Dante gave a mock bow toward her, then to the audience, but she noticed something only a fighter would see. His breathing was slightly heavier. He'd been working harder than he wanted to show. She sat on the stool in her corner, hands resting lightly on her knees, eyes fixed on him. She didn't need to grin or taunt. She had something better. Patience. When the third round began, she decided she would start taking pieces of him, one movement, one mistake at a time. The bell signaled the start of the third round, and Aaliyah rose from her stool with the same calm, measured steps she had taken into the ring. Dante, on the other hand, bounced on his toes, playing to the crowd with exaggerated jabs at the air. "Ready for the real thing now?" he called out, smirking. His voice carried that same arrogance, but underneath, Aaliyah caught the subtle shift in his tone, an almost imperceptible edge. They met in the center. Dante flicked out a jab, and she slipped to the side, letting it skim past her ear. Another came quickly, and again she avoided it without countering. She wanted him overconfident, reckless. As she moved, the ballroom lights glinted off the ropes, sending brief flashes into her eyes. It triggered a memory. Years ago, in the small, dimly lit garage where her father trained her. He had hung an old bulb overhead that swayed slightly, casting shifting shadows across the punching bag. "Learn to see past the light," he'd told her. If you can track your target when the light plays tricks, you can track it anywhere. Back then, she'd thought it was just another quirky drill. Now, here in this ring, she understood. Every distraction was a test of focus.
Dante threw a hook toward her ribs, but she pivoted away. He followed with a cross, heavier this time. She blocked it, feeling the impact shudder down her arm. A ripple of laughter and applause came from the tables, as if they were watching a magician repeat a trick they thought they understood. But Aaliyah's mind wasn't on the crowd, it was on the pattern. The more he tried to land clean shots, the more predictable his combinations became. She could sense the build-up before each punch.
The way his breathing and footwork betrayed him. Then, between exchanges, her thoughts drifted to a night she'd tried to forget. She was 13 in the community gym, watching her father confront a man twice his size. Not in the ring, by the lockers. The man had mocked a young boy for his form, called him weak. Her father had stepped forward, not to fight, but to place a hand on the boy's shoulder and say, "You train for yourself." Not for their applause. It was the first time she'd truly understood that boxing wasn't just about blows, it was about dignity. Dante came at her again with that same looping hook. This time, she didn't just duck. She stepped in close, forcing him to adjust, and brushed his ribs with a quick jab from her left hand. It wasn't enough to hurt, but it was enough to tell him she could touch him whenever she wanted. For the first time, Dante's smile faltered mid-round. It wasn't gone, but it was thinner, less certain. He circled faster now, trying to reassert dominance. From the corner of her eye, Aaliyah caught sight of a man in a navy suit at the edge of the crowd. His posture was rigid, his eyes locked on her. She recognized him instantly, Coach Ramirez, her father's old sparring partner. She hadn't seen him since the funeral. His expression was unreadable, but the slight nod he gave her felt like a silent approval, as if to say, "Now's the time." The round ended with Dante lunging in, only for her to slip under his arm and let him stumble forward. The crowd gasped, some laughing, some murmuring. Aaliyah walked calmly to her corner, her breathing steady. She had begun the match as the butt of a joke. Now, with each passing minute, she was becoming something else entirely. An opponent. And Dante was beginning to realize it. The fourth round began with a change in the air, an almost imperceptible shift that Aaliyah felt before the bell even rang. It wasn't the cheers or the clinking of champagne glasses, it was the weight in Dante's stare. The casual arrogance was gone, replaced by something sharper. He came out fast, testing her guard with a flurry of jabs. She blocked and slipped, letting him set the tempo. Every strike told her more, his speed, his angles, the slight delay when he reset his stance. Dante wasn't smiling now. He was studying her too. The crowd leaned in closer, their laughter replaced with murmurs. Even those who had cheered his mockery were now sensing the tension building in the ring. The ballroom felt smaller, the lights hotter. Aaliyah kept her feet moving, circling just out of range. She heard her father's voice again. "A fight is a conversation. Let them speak first, and they'll tell you everything you need to know." Midway through the round,
Dante tried to cut off her movement, stepping hard to her left. She read the shift instantly, slipped inside his jab, and ducked under the right cross that followed. She felt the wind of it pass over her ear, and when she came up, their eyes met at close range. Something flickered there, a spark of respect buried under irritation. Then he threw a body shot. She caught it on her elbow, pivoted away, and reset. It was then she noticed the change in the audience. The polite clapping had stopped.
No one was looking at their drinks or their phones anymore. All eyes were locked on the ring. As she circled, a memory rose unbidden. She was 16 in a dingy gym where the ceiling leaked when it rained. Her father had brought her to watch an amateur tournament. There had been a young fighter there, nervous, shaky in the first round, who grew sharper with each minute, adapting to his opponent. Her father had leaned down and whispered, "That's the mark of a real fighter. They start the match as a stranger and finish it knowing exactly who they're dealing with." That's what was happening now. She knew Dante in a way the crowd didn't yet. She knew how his power came in bursts, how he overcommitted on his hooks, how his left foot dragged just enough to slow his recovery. He tried that same looping left hook again. This time, she didn't just duck. She leaned back, letting it graze past her nose, and smiled faintly as she stepped away. It was small, but enough to needle him. Dante pressed forward harder, his gloves snapping through the air, but his punches were growing less precise. Aaliyah's patience was working like a slow-drip poison. Every miss was a seed of frustration planted in his mind. The round ended with no heavy blows landed, but the shift was undeniable. The laughter from earlier had completely vanished. In its place was an electric silence, the kind that comes when a crowd senses the script might be flipping. In her corner, Aaliyah sipped water and kept her eyes on him. His breathing was heavier now, the sheen of sweat on his brow catching the light. The longer this went on, the more the balance was tilting, and Dante could feel it. The bell for the 5th round rang with a sharper urgency, as if it sensed the tension in the room. Dante didn't waste a second. He came at her with a jab-cross combination, meant to finally crack her guard. The gloves smacked against her forearms, the force jolting her back a half step. But Aaliyah didn't flinch. She stayed locked on his rhythm. Each time he stepped in, she read the shift in his weight, the angle of his shoulder. She was looking for one thing, that familiar overreach on his hook. The crowd was quieter now, not out of disinterest but from leaning forward, waiting. They could sense the match had stopped being a joke. Dante feinted a jab high, then aimed a right at her ribs. She absorbed it, then pivoted to the side. It was in that half second when he was square, off balance, that she saw her chance. Her left fist shot forward, landing clean against the side of his torso. It wasn't a knockout blow, but it was precise, well placed. The sound of the impact, glove to body, was crisp enough to echo in the ballroom. Dante's breath hitched just for a moment, and the crowd went strangely still. A few gasps broke the silence. It wasn't just the hit, it was the fact that she had landed it on her own terms after minutes of letting him dictate the pace. Dante stepped back quickly, hiding the brief wince behind a forced grin. "Nice shot," he muttered, though his eyes were harder now. Aaliyah didn't answer, she just reset her stance. In that quiet, a memory pressed in, her father, years ago, working the heavy bag in the garage. He'd stopped mid-combination, tapped his own ribs, and told her, "If you can make a man's lungs forget how to work for even a second, you've just bought yourself control of the fight." That's what she'd just done. Dante charged again, throwing heavier shots, each one a little wilder than the last. Aaliyah kept moving, deflecting, making him miss by inches. Every miss drew more of the crowd into her corner. They weren't laughing now, they were watching her. Toward the end of the round, Dante overcommitted on a right cross. She slipped to the outside and tapped him with a jab. Not enough to hurt, but enough to say, "I can touch you whenever I want." The bell clanged. Dante returned to his corner quickly, his trainer leaning in close, speaking urgently. But his eyes kept flicking toward her as if he was trying to solve a puzzle that wasn't giving up its answer. Aaliyah sat calmly, her breathing steady, eyes fixed on him. The seed had been planted. Now it was just a matter of letting it grow. By the start of the 6th round, the ballroom no longer felt like a black tie charity event. The air was thick, charged with a kind of collective anticipation. Even the clink of glasses had stopped. All eyes were on the ring. Dante came out swinging, his gloves snapping through the air with more force than before. He'd abandoned the playful jabs and was now throwing combinations meant to break her guard entirely. But force without control is a gift to a fighter who knows how to use it. Aaliyah's footwork became sharper, lighter. She slid out of range, pivoted, made him miss by the narrowest of margins. Every time he overreached, she took a mental note. She could almost hear her father's calm voice in her head. "Let him dig his own grave. You just show him where the shovel is." Dante's frustration was visible now, his teeth clenched, his shoulders tighter. He threw a hook that whistled past her jaw, the power of it so great that his balance faltered for a fraction of a second. That's when she stepped in with a short, snapping jab to his cheek. It didn't drop him, but the crowd reacted instantly, a wave of murmurs and gasps rolling through the room. For the first time all night, Dante took a full step back, resetting his stance. His eyes were different now, less mocking, more calculating. The moment reminded Aaliyah of a fight she'd watched on a grainy VHS tape with her father, a match where the underdog spent round after round absorbing pressure until the champion started doubting himself. Her father had leaned back in his chair and said, "Doubt is heavier than any punch you can throw." Midway through the round, Dante tried to trap her in the corner. He threw a rapid 3-punch combo jab, cross, hook, but she ducked under the last shot and slipped out to the side, leaving him swinging at empty air. A few people in the audience actually cheered. That sound, that shift, lit something in her. The crowd was starting to see what she'd known from the first moment. She belonged here. Dante's punches grew more erratic. Sweat streamed down his temples, his breathing heavier now, his footwork just a shade slower. She stayed patient, making him miss, answering with quick counters that didn't just score, they chipped away at his composure. The round ended with Dante throwing a wide hook that she leaned away from, letting him stumble slightly into the ropes. The bell rang before he could recover. As she walked back to her corner, she caught the eye of Coach Ramirez again. This time, he wasn't unreadable. There was a half smile on his face, the kind that said, "You've got him." The 7th round began with a silence so taut, it felt like the room was holding its breath. Dante's robe of arrogance had slipped entirely. What stood before her now was a man trying to salvage his pride. His gloves were high, his eyes narrowed, and his steps carried an urgency that hadn't been there before. Aaliyah could feel it. The rhythm of the fight had shifted fully into her hands. She was no longer reacting to him. He was reacting to her. He opened with a heavy jab, followed by a right cross. She blocked the first, slipped the second, and felt the air move past her face. When she countered with a quick 1-2, the second punch landed flush on his chin, not enough to drop him, but enough to snap his head back. A collective gasp broke from the crowd. Dante's pride flared. He came forward with a barrage, wild and furious, hooks, crosses, uppercuts, each thrown with raw power, but less and less precision. She moved like water, flowing around him, letting his momentum work against him. Every miss took more from him than any landed punch could. She remembered a night in her father's garage when he'd shown her how to dismantle a stronger opponent. "You don't have to stop the storm," he'd said. "You just have to let it burn itself out." And now the storm was burning. Midway through the round, Dante made the same mistake she'd been waiting for since the first bell. He overcommitted on his left hook, stepping too far forward. She slipped under it, came up inside his guard and unleashed a three-punch combination, left to the body, right to the chin, and a sharp left hook to the jaw. The sound of that last shot cracked through the air like a whip. Dante's legs buckled, he staggered, his gloves lowering instinctively. She didn't pounce recklessly, she stepped forward with precision, delivering one final right cross square to his chin. The champion dropped to the canvas. The ballroom erupted, not with jeers or mockery, but with stunned, electric noise. Some people stood, others covered their mouths. The referee rushed in, starting the count. Dante was dazed, blinking up at the lights as if seeing them for the first time. Aaliyah stepped back, her breathing steady, her eyes never leaving him. She didn't raise her gloves in triumph. She simply waited. The count reached 10. The match was over. The crowd was no longer looking at a 19-year-old girl in a hoodie. They were looking at the fighter who had silenced a room full of doubt. 2 weeks later, the ballroom looked different. The lights weren't as harsh. The crowd was smaller, and the ring had been taken down. In its place stood a podium with the youth boxing program's banner draped across it. The same donors and community leaders had gathered again, but this time their conversations carried a different kind of energy. On stage, Dante Carver adjusted the microphone. Gone was the gold-trimmed robe, the smug grin, the air of untouchable superiority. He wore a simple suit, and his expression was steady but humble. "I've stood in a lot of rings," he began, his voice clear, but lacking the bravado that had once been his trademark. "But 2 weeks ago, I was in one where I didn't win the fight, and I'm grateful for that." The audience murmured, some leaning forward. "I thought I was giving the crowd a bit of fun," Dante continued, glancing briefly toward the side of the stage. "But I was really giving them a front-row seat to my own ignorance. I underestimated someone because of her age, her size, her gender, her skin, and I paid for it in the best way possible, with a lesson I'll carry for the rest of my life." From her seat near the front, Aaliyah watched him speak. She wasn't dressed for the ring now, just a neat blouse and slacks, but she carried herself with the same composure she had that night. Beside her, Coach Ramirez sat with his arms crossed, a faint smile on his face. Dante gestured toward her. "Aaliyah Brooks didn't just outbox me, she showed me what real strength looks like."
It's not about knocking someone down, it's about standing your ground when the world tells you to step aside. Applause rippled through the room. Aaliyah rose when he invited her to join him on stage. She walked up without rush, shook his hand firmly, and turned to face the crowd. "I didn't step into that ring to prove I was better than anyone," she said softly, her voice carrying. "I stepped in because I've seen too many people let themselves be defined by someone else's expectations."
"My father taught me that respect isn't given, it's earned. That night I earned his." She glanced at Dante, who nodded. "And he earned mine." The applause this time was louder, warmer. After the ceremony, people came up to her, young girls asking about training, older men offering congratulations, even strangers admitting they'd been wrong about her. Dante lingered nearby, shaking hands and smiling, not as a fallen champion, but as a man who'd been changed. Outside, the evening air was cool. Aaliyah stepped into the streetlight, feeling the quiet hum of the city around her. She thought about her father, how he'd probably laugh at the idea of her becoming the story of a charity event gone wrong. But she also knew he'd be proud. The real fight, she realized, had never been about punches or knockouts. It had been about breaking the assumptions that had stood like walls between her and the respect she deserved. She took a deep breath and smiled to herself. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel to discover more stories about how extraordinary people turn humiliation into triumph.